The intro is the hardest. It's always the hardest. Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Nick, and this is a channel called Watchlist Roulette. Today I'm going to go over my top 10 films of 2023. 2023 was stacker, like that game that used to be at, I don't know, Dave & Buster's or some shit. Comparing it to the last couple of years we've had, it has been one of the heaviest lineups of great films we've had in a long time, I think. I mean, I love 2021. Last year I thought was really good. And then this year just came in one up that. I can only hope that 2024 is going to be continuing the pattern, but God knows, because to be honest, we always look back on great years in cinema and things always fluctuate from year to year, but this was a damn good one. I feel like we'll be looking back on very, very positively when the dust has settled. This list I've made is all based on personal opinion, all based on personal taste. These are my favorite films of 2023. I'm not necessarily saying they are objectively the best. If you disagree with some of the picks, that's fine. If you like some of the picks, that's even better. You know, if you want to bust down my door and say, you know, fuck you, where's Spider-Verse? I get it. We all have different films that came out this year that we love and that we feel strongly about. It's all just based on personal opinion, and it's all for fun. So if you've got a list of your favorite films of 2023, you're welcome to drop them in the comments section. I'd love to see what you thought of the films that came out this year. It's always cool to see how everybody's film taste is different and everybody's list that comes up at the end of the year. It's always cool to see different perspectives on the year in cinema. I only had room for 10 and a couple of honorable mentions, and a bunch of them that were pretty fucking good didn't make the cut. I mean, we can start right now. Let's rattle some off as quickly as I can, okay? Joyland, which was a film that was released in 2022 in Pakistan. I think it got its North American release here in maybe March or April of 2023. It is a gut punch, and it's not necessarily a happy film like the title might suggest, but it was incredibly well crafted. Killers of the Flower Moon. If you told me at the beginning of the year that this was not going to be in my top 10, color me shocked. I am a big Scorsese fan, and yeah, it just didn't make the cut. I had to give it the old Nicky Santoro and the cornfields from Casino. I just had to do it that way. Blackberry. I'm not totally jive with the great business biopics and rise and fall biopics of corporations, but this one was incredibly entertaining and funny. The whole thing is pretty much held up on the shoulders of Glenn Howerton, who is maybe one of my favorite supporting performances of the year. Asteroid City is probably my favorite Wes Anderson film that he's made in, what, the last 10 years? The Iron Claw. Oh, here comes the signature move, the Iron Claw. Shite Parenting 101, by the way. Infinity Pool. I am a huge fan of Brandon Cronenberg and what he's been doing lately. I was a big fan of Possessor. I'm a big fan of this one. It might be sacrilegious, but I think I like his films a bit more than his dad. Barbie. Any film that has an obscure reference to Pavement that probably has no business being in there is good in my books. I had a lot of fun with it. Fallen Leaves, my introduction to Aki Kaurismäki, and boy, was it something. The Killer. Honestly shocked at how much I liked it. I had no hopes for it, and I wasn't really anticipating it. I'm not even really a big Fincher head. This is probably my favorite film he's made since The Social Network. Yeah. Yeah, it's bold, man, and I feel like a lot of Fincher fans might be giving me the old George Bush shoe treatment for that opinion. Honestly, I thought it was great. One of my kind of favorite, like, low expectation but great reward films for me this year. But now that we got a lot of good films that are not good enough to make the cut, now we're gonna get into two honorable mentions. We got a two-pack here, folks. Listen up and listen up good, because these two films have been on my mind nonstop ever since I saw them. Showing Up by Kelly Reichardt. Kelly Reichardt is a filmmaker that I have a great admiration for. I really dig the style of her films, the simplicity, the character studies, just how downright human her films are. A film that shows a portrait of an artist who is struggling to work on her craft leading up to a big exhibit for her art. She's dealing with a lot of family issues and friend issues. Her landlord is turned off her hot water, is not getting it back on. She's got issues with her mother who she works with, her father who's estranged, her brother who seems to be in a bit of a crisis and is tough to figure out what the right thing to do in this situation is. But it's a film where you piggyback on the back of this character played by Michelle Williams to great subtlety and great impact. If you've ever seen Kelly Reichardt's films, they're often slow moving, often character driven, and in my opinion incredibly realistic. This is a film that I cannot stop thinking about. I liked it when I first saw it, but really everything about it has grown on me, and I cannot stop thinking about it. That is usually a green flag. That usually means that it's time to go back and see it again, and I only know I'm gonna like it a hell of a lot more when I go back to it. Again, I love the relaxed, solemn nature of her films. Everything she depicts in this film is an ode to art and rings true for anyone who has dedicated their life to it. May December, da-na-na-na, da-na-na. I'm not gonna try to do the music. I can listen to the music from May December all fucking day. I love that soundtrack. I love that score, which I know was repurposed from an older film, but it is still so good. Again, May December is a film that you probably might be familiar with. It's on Netflix now. A film where Natalie Portman plays this actress who is coming in to study a scandal of a relationship between an older woman and a young teenage boy. That boy has grown up as an adult, and they're in this marriage, and Natalie Portman's character, this actress, is trying to investigate her newest role in this indie film as this woman who is a predator who is still married after so long to this young man. Great ensemble. Charles Melton's probably the highlight. I think it's really cool to see a guy like him get his fair due and be talked about just how good he is, how great he is at creating this character who is clearly in a state of arrested development and is still almost like a child even when he's older. And the relationship between him and Julianne Moore's character, it's almost like he's married to his guardian, not a wife. He creates that dynamic pretty convincingly. They both do, and Julianne Moore's great. Julianne Moore is Julianne Moore. She's just great in everything, and it's no surprise here. Natalie Portman, I feel like, is terrific in this film. Doesn't nearly get enough credit. I've been coming around to her as an actress, and I thought she was perfect for May December as this character. And it's a concept that honestly on the surface I wouldn't have cared for if it was not for that meta aspect of an actress trying to assume and morph into the identity of this other woman. I feel like if it didn't have that angle, it wouldn't have worked for me. I think it's a tragic drama. I don't think it's anywhere near comedy or camp the way some people talk about it. Sure, there are funny moments, but I think it's a lot more sad than that, so we'll leave it at that. And now, where's my coffee? On to my picks for the very top 10 films that I saw in 2023, my favorites of 2023. So yeah, let's dive right into it. Number 10. Talk to Me is a film by Michael and Danny Filippo from Australia. And this was, when I first discovered this film, I kind of thought I was in for another generic A24 horror made film. And I think there are some people that do have the opinion that that is what Talk to Me is. And I think it is a lot fresher and more inventive and scarier than some of the A24 horror films we've got in a while. More creative than I was prepared to give it credit for. The sound design, when I saw this in a theater, had me very jittery, very jumpy, kind of scared the shit out of me. If I need to explain this film to you very quick, a bunch of teenagers have parties. They have this embalmed hand that they found somewhere. You connect with it. It kind of brings you in touch with these demons and creepy visions from some sort of purgatory. All the fun they have with this hand at parties goes too far. The wrong characters take the wrong turns, and they have to try to figure out how to get out from underneath this hand spell. And again, from the trailer when I saw it, it looked generic. It sounded generic. Okay, here's one more generic A24 horror film. But from the visuals to the sound to the performances of these young adolescent characters, there's some sequences in this film that I thought were truly fucking scary. I thought it works as a great metaphor for substance abuse, peer pressure, how annoying and how dangerous the social media world can be for younger people. There's a lot more going on in this film under the surface than I expected, and on top of it is probably the most genuinely freaky A24 horror I've seen since, I don't know, Hereditary, and that's saying a lot because that's one of my favorite horror films ever. So really dug it, really thought it was a lot more interesting and inventive than I thought it would be. I feel like I'm rambling on very generically and not telling you much, but I gotta move on to number 9. Number 9 is American Fiction by Cord Jefferson. American Fiction is a film that I saw for the first time at TIFF. I went into this film pretty much knowing nothing about it. There was no poster for promotion, there was no trailer, there was no anything. It was just based on the general synopsis that I read. And if you're not familiar with this film, Jeffrey Wright plays this author who is struggling creatively and financially. He is a black man in America, but he's not telling black stories as some people would put it. He's encouraged by his agent to maybe go down that road, but he's not interested. He then stumbles upon another author, played by Issa Rae, who completely submits to selling out and writing that book about the ghetto and baby mamas and getting pregnant and gunshots in the hood, and it's all stereotypes that we've seen in books and in film. Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, you name it. And it's a book like that. he can tell she's a total fraud and that she's never experienced anything like that, coming from a great education and a great background. And the book is a huge success for her. And so he has the idea to rub it in her and everybody else's face that anybody can write this type of book. It doesn't take talent. It's not authentic. And it's just a total hack job. And so he imitates what she does. He writes his own shitty novel that is filled with dumb stereotypes. And the book takes off, becomes a giant hit. Because he's struggling financially, he has to follow it and keep it up and kind of keep up the act of operating under this pseudonym and assuming the form of somebody who he isn't really. It's a film about exploiting racial stereotypes. It's a bit on cashing in and how ridiculous it all becomes for this character. When I saw this at TIFF, everybody went into it not knowing much about it, and it was so funny. You know it's funny when you can't even, when one joke lands, you can't even think or hear the next joke because everybody in the theater has erupted into laughter. People basically like keeling over, belly laughing. It was an amazing experience. I saw it a second time a month ago in a theater that was relatively empty. It was still awesome. Did it lose a bit of juice though because it wasn't as cool as seeing it with a full crowd? Maybe. The film is a bit uneven. There's a lot of family drama in the film that isn't shown in the trailer. Calling it a mixed bag might not be the right thing, but it's a really great satirical comedy. The type of comedy where taking the ridiculousness of the satire, you could easily push it too far and jump the shark and totally cross the line. But this film kind of straddles that tightrope walk very well. It never feels like it gets stale and that it goes too far or that it doesn't go far enough. Cord Jefferson finds a great balance. Yeah, incredibly funny satirical comedy that is incredibly relevant today. Number 8, Past Lives by Celine Song, a film that is astoundingly reserved and subtle for a directorial debut. If you're not familiar with Past Lives, two people who as children in Korea had a great friendship and a great bond and maybe a little bit of a crush on each other. The girl, played by Greta Lee, her family immigrates to Canada when she's a young child. When she grows up, she moves to New York, she gets married, and somewhere in the present day, we see her and this childhood friend, childhood crush reconnect. They rekindle, they talk about old times past, what they're doing now, and we are submitted to spectating these two characters rekindle. While I wouldn't call it similar in its execution, it really reminded me of one of my favorite all-time films, Before Sunset by Richard Linklater. Again, not necessarily in the way it's executed in that degree. I don't think they could be any different. Two people re-investigating a missed connection and coming together, talking about old times, talking about the present time, talking about the future, asking themselves the question, what if, what could have been, how things might have been different? What if you didn't go down the right path? What if these misconnections are misconnections for a reason? Am I married to the right person? Just a film about deep down trying to figure out how to justify your feelings and cope with them. It was a film that was incredibly simple and poetic, but packed an incredibly strong punch for me. I've seen so many good films in the second half of 2023. I first saw this in, I think, June when it came out, and I've not been able to take it off this list or stop thinking about it since. And I think about it all the time, and I just keep thinking like, man, I really got to go back to it. Yeah, I think that's good. Fuck it. Coming in at number 7, I was talking about earlier how Killers of the Flower Moon, I was shocked that it didn't make my top 10. There are films that, in reverse, I'm shocked made it into the top 10. If you told me at the beginning of the year that a Godzilla film would be sitting in my top 10 of 2023, I wouldn't even know what to say. I haven't had high hopes for a Godzilla film in a long time. Godzilla 2014 with Gareth Edwards, I'm fine with it. The sequel, King of Monsters, I fucking don't even remember any of it. I never ended up seeing Godzilla vs. Kong, but at some point I am gonna see it because it's just fun to watch a dinosaur and a monkey beat the fuck out of each other. And the trailer for the new one looks ridiculous because he shouldn't be able to run like that. But with Godzilla Minus One, there has come a point where we finally have a Godzilla film that finds the balance. And when I say find the balance, I'm talking about nailing what Godzilla should be, but also nailing the human characters, their drama and their story, and giving you the ability to care about them. I was watching a review of Godzilla Minus One by Mark Kermode, the British critic, and he made a great point that great monster movies and great Godzilla movies, kaiju movies, whatever you want to say, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but it was It was more along the lines of, you know, like a fine monster movie is a monster movie that happens to have people in it, but a great one is a human drama with people, but there also happens to be a monster. And that's how I feel about Godzilla Minus One. It takes place in post-war Japan. Japan is in shambles. They're slowly trying to rebuild after the war. And everybody in Japan is just trying to rebuild their life. You got this protagonist who was a kamikaze pilot in World War II, failed to achieve his mission and has felt like a coward and a traitor ever since. Once Godzilla shows up in the film, who he's had a prior experience with from the beginning of the film, he's seeing a path toward redemption where he can make peace with himself about his failures at past points in his life. There is so much depth to the characters and the humans in this film. Again, the characters at the forefront, this pilot, this woman that he's with fostering this baby, the general public of Japan. You're seeing this mistrust of their government. And there's so much more in terms of the human drama to unpack than I've seen in Godzilla films of the past. In terms of the design of Godzilla in this film and the way he operates, it's fucking scary. He truly looks and walks and moves and destroys the way you would think classic Godzilla would. I think a lot of things with this film, from the setting, the time period, to the way Godzilla looks, the way he moves, feels like harkening back to basics of what Godzilla was all about when you look at the original from the 50s. Feels more like classic Godzilla, and he does not discriminate in his destruction. He is not actively seeking out vengeance on certain people or actively attacking certain things. Just his being there, just his physicality. He swings his tail the wrong way, fucking destroys a building, steps in the wrong direction. It made a terrifying fucking Godzilla. When he shows up, you're like, fuck, man. Don't crush that building. They just built the fucking thing again. Please. On to number 6, Poor Things by Yorgos Lanthimos. This was one of my most anticipated films of the year. I've become a big fan of Yorgos Lanthimos, from Killing of a Sacred Deer to The Favorite. He has some films that I really appreciate, and Poor Things, you can make the argument, is maybe his best work so far. It is a twisted tale of human autonomy. You're watching this character, Bella Baxter, find her bearings and understand what it means to be a human being. She's kind of this experiment of this scientist, played by Willem Dafoe. You're watching Bella Baxter's character go from childhood to adolescence to adulthood. I mean, discovering the world. She visits the outside world and she travels. She figures out how human beings interact, what they do, figures out how to do that herself, figures out what it means to be a woman, bodily autonomy, sexual freedom and expression. It all is in this picturesque, fantasy-like setting, the way it looks. Yorgos let his imagination run wild in one of, if not the most ambitious film I've seen all year. Emma Stone in this film, I mean, for any Hollywood A-list actress, it's always interesting to see how far they will go in their risk-taking, and this is an incredibly fearless and bold performance, way more than I was expecting. I heard pretty wild things about it before I saw it, and I was like, okay, well, it's not going to be that crazy, but it was. And all the while watching it, all I could think of was how fearless and gutsy it was, and the way she perfectly finds a way to make the smooth transition between the character's childhood, adolescence, and adult. It's really an amazing transition. Just how good she is at playing each stage of that life, how good she is at playing a kid, how good she is playing this woman trying to figure it out, who she grows into in her adult life. Emma Stone is so good at exemplifying what feels like 3 different characters in one. One of my favorite ensembles of the year, again, Dafoe is a personal favorite of mine. Mark Ruffalo is not necessarily one of my favorite actors, but God, he's fucking hilarious in this movie, and you can't help but love his character of Duncan Wedderburn. He is such a fool. And it is played in such a klutzy, dumb, snivelly, pretentious way, but he's so damn funny. Everything looks great. Ari Aster, who directed Hereditary, Midsommar, Beau's Afraid, he said the film looks like it was made in a cheesecake factory visually. I got to agree with him there. Between the set, the colors, the extremely intense use of fisheye lenses and different visual flares, it really reminded me of something of Terry Gilliam or Tim Burton. And if you long for the days of films that were that creative and wacky and insane, then Poor Things would be right up your alley if you haven't seen it yet. And of all the films on my top 10, this is maybe the one that I want to revisit the most. I wanted to go back to the theater and see it again. I just haven't had the time or made the time to do it, but I'm like itching to go back to it. Not only is it a powerful film on watching this woman figure out who she is and her role in the world, but it's just wildly entertaining at the same time. It's a knee slapper. Ow! Fuck. The Zone of Interest by Jonathan Glazer. It's been 10 years since Under the Skin fucked me up. Probably fucked a lot of people up. Jonathan Glazer is a filmmaker that I'm always wondering, where the fuck is he? I'm always taken aback by how long he takes in between his films. And 10 years later is 2023, and The Zone of Interest is maybe his most amazing achievement yet. To put it simply through synopsis, the commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss, and his wife Hedwig strive to build a dream life for their family in a house and garden next to the camp. This is a Holocaust film. It is not nearly as confrontational or violent as Holocaust films of the past. It is a film where you are seeing this idyllic family life next to Auschwitz and the horrors of Auschwitz. Never seeing over the wall, over the fence. You're always hearing the horrors and atrocities of Auschwitz through the sound design, and our focus in the forefront is on this family and their way of living. And in the background, evil is always lurking. You never see it. It's never right in your face, but it's there. You can hear it, you can feel it. You are often trying to connect to it while you were focusing on what is going on with this family in front of it. It is seeing many complicit and guilty people successfully ignoring this sick and twisted elephant in the room. Visually, I think it's amazing. Glazer's use of framing, composition, where he's building some of these shots. I just learned that it was natural light they used in this film, not necessarily a traditional movie setup with lights. They had cameras set up at certain positions in the house, and I think it's incredibly successful in making you feel like a fly on the wall in these people's lives. And just watching a Nazi family be so dismissive of all the evil happening around them and the fact that they're responsible for it. And it is frustrating. It's insanely sad. And the way it's shown in this regular, everyday, idyllic dream life next to the concentration camp, that juxtaposition is incredibly uncomfortable and shocking to see people who are involved in this treat it like everyday business. The score helps highlight the brooding, ominous nature of the film. I'm not going to get into spoilers, but there's a lot of gutsy creative decisions and jumping back and forth between certain points in time. I'm not going to get into what I mean by that. One of my favorite endings in any film all year. My jaw was on the floor. Startling how powerful a film Jonathan Glazer made with this simple, subdued style to it. And none of it is in your face or confrontational. None of it really truly feels like it's beating you over the head. But the evil that is in this film is always hovering somewhere in the background, and you are always, through your ears or through your mind, connecting with that evil. It is there, but it is never truly in your face or hitting you over the head. And I thought it was incredibly well done. It's such a fine line to toe and do correctly, to the point where it could have failed miserably if it tried too hard, but it doesn't. I thought it was insanely unique, jaw-dropping, makes your stomach churn. I've seen the opinion that, oh, it's great, but I'm never going to watch it again. And I don't feel the same way. I think I could easily watch this again just because I'm so fascinated with a lot of the creative choices that Jonathan Glazer and his team made with this film. I was just fascinated by the way they went about putting it together. I thought it was incredible. Yeah, I thought it was incredible. See it. Anatomy of a Fall, directed by Justin Triet. Back-to-back Sandra Hüller, and her performance in Anatomy of a Fall is maybe one of my favorite performances of the whole year. In Anatomy of a Fall, you've got this situation where this woman's husband dies from some sort of freak accident. He falls out of a window in their home in Grenoble. Upon investigation, they're trying to figure out, well, what happened? Was it a accident? Was it a suicide? Was it a homicide? Sandra Hüller, who plays a character named Sandra, and her young son, who is blind, are thrust into this court case where Sandra and her now dead husband, their relationship is on trial. Every detail about their past and the life they had together, their relationship, is being examined inside out in this court case. And she is trying her best to explain what happened, even though really nobody knows what happened. You got a great Sandra Hüller performance. Milo Machado Graner provides this amazing child performance again that seemed exhausting. Even the dog Snoop is good in this film. We even have a great dog performance to highlight in 2023. This film is all killer, no filler. Every shot, every line of dialogue, every detail that has everything to do with making a giant impact on this story and its conclusion. It's some of the best writing I've seen in any film this year. Like I said, every detail, every line of dialogue, the structure of it feels so airtight to the point where you can't poke holes in it. It's such an amazing critique on a relationship and all of its flaws and all of the vitriol between two partners. Understanding, can you be held guilty for a faulty, failed relationship? Can you be guilty for somebody else's actions because of how you lived with them and how you interacted with them? And it's just watching the most intimate moments of somebody's life be put on a stage, and truly astonishing the detail that they go into in this court case that is all incredibly well acted. I'm not even a sucker for whodunits or court dramas. They're not necessarily genres that are my bread and butter, but there are always films that could be an exception to the rule, and Anatomy of a Fall is one of them, from every aspect of this film. Visually, performances, dialogue, writing, story structure. I loved just about every detail of it, and I really can't get into much because of spoilers, but one of the most original, refreshing films that I saw all year. Oppenheimer, directed by Christopher Nolan. I have a flawed relationship with the films of Christopher Nolan. I would not consider myself to be a Nolan head. I enjoy his Dark Knight trilogy. I think Interstellar is pretty damn good. Outside of that, I'm not huge on his films. However, this film, I think this is the best film he's ever made. I honestly think that this is an achievement that is so far and away the most impressive thing I've seen from him. Maybe one of the best leading performances he's gotten out of an actor in Cillian Murphy, who is maybe one of, if not my performance of the year. The use of practical effects with its explosions, the incredibly tight editing for a 3-hour film that goes through so much information, and even then it almost feels like it's not long enough. It is so well edited and so well paced. I've seen it 3 times now, which I was shocked. I didn't think I would see it that many times at this point, considering that I'm not a huge Nolan guy, but it really is one of the most engrossing films I've seen all year that I've kind of become obsessed with. And for a 3-hour film, the way it's paced, the way it's edited, the way it looks, everything about it, everything flies by. It's one of the easiest 3-hour watches I've had in a long, long time. There's a gigantic ensemble that I don't need to go through. Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, fucking Benny Safdie, who every time I see Benny Safdie in anything, I feel like a parent watching their kid get up on the stage at graduation. I just feel proud to see him excel in acting, and he's terrific in this film. The list goes on and on and on and on. There's ones that I haven't even mentioned. There are so many. Jason Clarke, the most underrated performance of this year. I thought he was astounding in Oppenheimer, and I have not seen many people giving him his flowers. I thought he was brilliant. The most impressive ensemble of acting I've seen all year. I just don't feel like I'm talking in circles right now, but I feel like there's just not much I can add. Visually stunning. The Trinity test scene is just otherworldly in the execution. Everything after, with the examination of Oppenheimer, the back and forth between him and Strauss, played by Downey Jr. The thing is with Nolan, he likes to jump between timelines all over the place. This isn't all of his films. This is the most cohesive I've ever seen it in his films. Everything about this film was a total spectacle and just a grand historical biopic that I've seen 3 times and I could sit down and watch it again. I become glued to it and enamored with it. I just don't know what else to add that hasn't already been said, but I think it is the greatest achievement of his career, which is already a very storied one and a very celebrated one. But this feels like the very first time I've truly fallen in love with a Christopher Nolan film, and I couldn't be happier. The Boy and the Heron, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, is a film that, to me, was like the crowning movie-going experience of my year. I saw it at TIFF. It was a packed theater, not a seat empty. everybody was just, you could hear a pin drop in that theater. There was just this silent, giant appreciation of Miyazaki en masse as we were all seeing it happen for the first time. And this, to me, is one of my favorite Miyazaki films at this point. My ranking of his films is maybe a bit odd to some if I had to make a video about that. I think it's one of the very best films he's made, and one that feels incredibly personal. It's one of his most surreal films, definitely through a lot of the imagery he uses. The animation is absolutely incredible. There's no surprise there. That's been the story with all of his films throughout his career. Just the fact that every frame looks like a painting. Films like Miyazaki's are ones that I can't even understand how you begin to make a film like that. There are just things that go above and beyond my understanding of cinema, and his films, every time I see them, are just mind-bogglingly beautiful. It's a film about accepting loss, experiencing and dealing with trauma, adjusting to new and scary realities. The character of Mahito is navigating all of this, and it is presented to you in this crazy, hellish, surreal dreamscape. It just feels otherworldly, which often going through these experiences in life can feel. And Miyazaki takes these very personal concepts and puts his magical spin on it. And it's a question at the end of the day that maybe the old title before they named it The Boy and the Heron in North America, how do you live? Maybe that is all you need to know about a film like The Boy and the Heron. How do you live? How are you going to go from this point on? What are you going to build in this changing of the guard? This is a film that feels like, by the end of it, again with no spoilers, it feels like a swan song of Miyazaki passing on his stories and his craft to the next generation. Everything about this film felt like the perfect swan song. If this really is the last film that he makes, it just felt like you couldn't have a better film to feel like a goodbye, to go out on. And that's just what I felt like when I walked out of that theater. It was a movie-going experience that I'll never forget. And when I was sitting there watching it, I just kept being in awe of the fact that we are so lucky to get films like this from guys like Hayao Miyazaki. He's 82. I think he just turned 83, maybe. Happy birthday to the man. And the fact that he's in good enough health, even though he smokes like a fucking chimney and is awfully a pessimistic dude, in his old age, he still has stories he wants to tell. And we're just flat out lucky. That's it. That's all I felt when I was seeing it. I just thought, I am lucky. Everybody here is lucky. We, as a film-going community, are lucky. I could even touch on Martin Scorsese with Killers of the Flower Moon. Though it's not a film I necessarily love, I had the same feeling when I was seeing that. Like, we are lucky that at this age, these filmmakers, total mavericks, total legends of their field, are still going and still giving us films like this. And I just felt grateful. And that's really all I can explain to you about how much I love The Boy and the Heron. Number one. I had a hard time picking a number one this year. To be honest, between the last couple picks, Zone of Interest, Anatomy of a Fall, Oppenheimer, Boy and the Heron, any of these films could jump back and forth between number one. They're all interchangeable. Really, every film on this list feels interchangeable. There's really no good way for me to rank them. That concept is something I struggle with, trying to measure up films against one another. So making a number one pick seemed really hard, but at the same time, after seeing it and after letting it sit with me, I kind of felt like there was no other place to put it than number one. This was a film that struck a gigantic personal chord with me. I've had a history of loving this filmmaker and the particular collaboration he has with this specific actor in this film. Going into it, it was destined to be my number one. Some films you have huge anticipation for, and you kind of feel like you're setting yourself up for failure. Like, it's not going to be as good as I hope it will be. It's not going to necessarily be what I think it's going to be. And this was a case where a film was as good as I thought it would be, and it was everything I thought it was going to be. That is an incredibly satisfying feeling. The film I'm talking about is The Holdovers by Alexander Payne. Alexander Payne is a filmmaker that I've greatly appreciated for a long time. I love a lot of his films. Nebraska, Election, The Descendants is quite good. Sideways is one of my all-time favorite films. Paul Giamatti's performance in that film, to me, is one of my very favorites. The idea of the two of them getting back together for another film was like a dream to me. So again, this was me kind of playing my favorites, where I talked about Nolan, how I don't necessarily have a great relationship with his films. Payne was a different story on a completely opposite side of the spectrum. I have a positive bias toward Alexander Payne, and I already kind of knew I was going to love it. It just seemed like it was a foregone conclusion. And Alexander Payne refers to people's glowing endorsement of the holdovers as being cozy. He feels nauseated by that concept. And I understand that if you feel differently about something you created, you don't jive with the way other people are perceiving it. I also don't know if I would call it a cozy film, but at the same time, it kind of does. It kind of does feel like something you would be watching by the fireplace while the snow is falling outside. And never would I think a Christmas film would be at the top of my list, but here we are. It is a film that deals with a lot of characters who are at difficult junctions in their life, and it is a very bittersweet film. I could totally understand how he would refrain from calling it cozy, because you're going through a character who is this unhappy stickler of a teacher with a drinking problem, a young man who has been left behind at the holidays and doesn't really have anybody to relate to or connect to and is lashing out. You've got a character who takes care of everybody around them, but she is also grieving the loss of her son in Vietnam. And you're seeing three imperfect characters who at first feel like opposites of one another, but are starting to realize they have more in common than they think. And then that bond is created over the span of the film, and it just becomes a very nice, very cozy, heartwarming film. But at the center of it is characters navigating trauma and tough parts of their life, and it's a very bittersweet thing. The 70s influence on this film and how it feels like it popped right out of the 70s. From this film is rated R card coming out at the beginning of the film, the grain on the film, the soundtrack of it, a lot of comparison to Hal Ashby's films. I just rewatched The Last Detail. I saw startling similarities to that film, to this film. This film just perfectly transports you back to that time. There are a lot of films that try to emulate what it feels like in the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, trying to make modern period pieces, and they don't often quite click with how it should feel. I didn't grow up in the 70s, but The Holdovers made me feel like I was truly back there. I don't know what to say other than this film is a crowd-pleasing favorite. I love Paul Giamatti to death. I think he's a brilliant actor. If he ends up winning the Oscar for Best Actor, I will hit the roof with excitement. Da'Vine Joy Randolph, it almost feels like a lock that she's going to win Best Supporting Actress. She's fucking steamrolling every award show. It's like watching a football team go undefeated into the Super Bowl. It's just going to be hard to beat. Dominic Sessa, for a guy performing in his first film, holy shit, does he find a way to go toe-to-toe with some amazing talent and fit right in there. I thought he was a great fit. And everything about the film, from the snowy environment to the Christmas theme to characters, them kind of finding a bond, I think it's going to be a new Christmas classic for me. I can see myself watching this every year alongside the other films I watch at Christmas time. It's just too lovable to not put at the top. Like, it just is. Everything it had to say about being a person who feels like you're on the outside looking in, this film kind of accomplishes what that feels like to a T, and finding friendship and a connection in a very lonely place. It's just going to be the new comfort film. That's it. And it's always a great feeling when you find one of those. And The Holdovers is that for me. So, there it is. A list of my very favorite films from 2023. I hope you enjoyed this rambling, and I'd be interested to see what your favorite films of 2023 are again. Leave them in the comments. Tell me about them. If you enjoy this, you can stick around this channel for more film-related content. I'm going to be working on some audio-visual film essays. Going to be working on some Criterion Collection videos coming up within the next couple weeks. I do a series called Watchlist Roulette, which the channel is based on, where I kind of investigate my watch list by random. I shuffle my Letterboxd watch list and I watch films at random and then come back and discuss them in an episodic basis. It's a fucking ton of fun and I love doing it. I'm learning a hell of a lot and watching a whole lot of new things that I might not have otherwise checked out. And it's a great time. I'm just getting started putting this channel together, but I'm really enjoying everything I'm doing. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you can subscribe to Watchlist Roulette. You can hit the old thumbs up, which means that you, in fact, enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. And yeah, just comment and let's shoot the shit and talk about movies. So, yep, that's about it. What a fucking great year for film. Hopefully 2024 is as much of a banger as this one was. And I'll see you in a little bit. I might do an Oscars video as well. So who knows, man. But stay tuned for more of whatever this was. My social battery is drained, man. I feel fucking exhausted. Cool. I'll see you later.